If there was no Mormon, no man named Mormon who wrote down his book, if there was no Nephi and so on, then somebody saw fit to invent them. Somebody saw fit to invent them as characters. They identify themselves in the Book of Mormon. See, people talk about the Book of Mormon as fiction, which is lazy. If it's a fictional enterprise, then let's be clear about what it all entails. It doesn't read like fiction, like the conventions of fiction. Certainly not the fiction of the early 19th century. It doesn't read like a novel. This disappoints people. People disparage it, say, oh, it's really boring, what? I wanted to be surprised. I wanted to knock my socks off. Sound like some kind of literary agent. Surprise me, blow my mind, give me the most amazing story. Just knock my socks off. I want to be entertained. So, maybe they picked this up thinking, I want this to entertain me like a novel would. Kind of thinking in a similar way, picking up the Bible. Yeah, there's these stories from time to time. Get a whole bunch of really amazing stories, and then you get the dry, priestly manual, and then you get more stories, but it's not a novel. It's not written in novel conventions, and there's plenty of people throughout history that have found it boring because they're approaching it with the kind of attitude, expecting it to entertain them in the way that a novel does with these fiction conventions. So no, the the Book of Mormon sure does not do that. And so if it's a forgery in a fictional enterprise, then part of the enterprise of this fiction is to masquerade as an ancient text. It's not written in the way that a 19th century writing. It's not written in the way that a 19th century novel would be. Not even like a novel from a first-person narrator who identifies himself, such as Solomon Spaulding's clunky, clumsy novel. And it's not written in the manner of, say, a theological essay, or even like a purported revelation of ancient, lost truth would be. Though I'm not sure what there was available at the time in that ilk. But it's written so as to masquerade, and I'm again going with the hypothesis that it's a forgery. And somebody would have to decide to write something to take on the voice of ancient text. But not just that. People who, I don't know how many Americans of the early 19th century were in the intellectual habit or had the concept of reading the Bible and starting to think source critically. I know that the German school of, I'm pretty sure that the German higher criticism had already begun by then. But I don't know how many religiously devout people in Burned Over District would really be into that. I think for most of them, they just read the Bible as ancient text, and they didn't really bother to think very much about who wrote, say, the Deuteronomistic history. I don't think there was even the concept back then of the Deuteronomistic history. But in any case, the historical books of the Old Testament, it's just what happened, and it's just what it means, just because it's the Bible. So if you've got a book that's supposed to be mimicking that or sounding like that. And yet, you're also deciding to put it in the words of not one, not two, not three, but several narrators, several first-person narratives are contained. And the bulk of it is this narrative by this Mormon who becomes a character in his own right. All the narrators, practically all of the narrators, become characters in their own right if this is a fictional project. So part of the cognitive load, part of the complexity and the planning, the setting this out, is designing these characters, designing these narrators to play their parts and to have their say as characters, much as you might in a full-on like epistolary novel. You're purporting to, Mary Shelley has already written Frankenstein. She's got these various characters. What, like 2, 3? How many characters? I forget. Starts out with that. Is it all from the point of view of the sea captain? It is, isn't it? The sea captain. He's writing to his sister, and he narrates everything. Like, he takes down Victor's dictation, and then he takes down the monster's dictation. And from what I remember, there doesn't seem to be much of a very great difference in the voicings of these. It's all this kind of late 18th century literary style, and it's written by a very young author, which is kind of an interesting thing to contemplate. So it's not until much later that you're going to have something like Dracula or The Woman in White, and I don't know what other novels there are that purport to tell a story through the pens of several different narrators who are characters in their own right. But again, this is not a novel in that sense of writing from people. It would be essentially if there was somebody who decided to write not like a story about some shipwrecked Romans on America, but in America, but if somebody had set out to write some kind of religious pseudepigrapha, to forge it with the most comparable thing I can imagine would be if somebody had decided they were going to establish the authenticity of the New Testament books, maybe by writing new letters from Paul and other Gospels, or supplements to the named Gospels, of saying, I, John, really did write this Gospel, that Gospel that has my name on it, and here's more stuff that I, John, am writing that I hope won't get cut off from the scroll, wink wink. So these are all layers, these are all difficulties to heap up and add on to what it would require to make this as a forgery, to make this as a creative, fictional thing. So if people want to talk about the Book of Mormon and try to explain it as a modern production, the least they can do is to establish and maintain a clarity that this is what it would entail. If somebody's just going to throw out a dismissal saying, yeah, it's just fictional, it's bogus, it's just made up, and besides it's boring and there's really not much to it, then I think we ought to take license to dismiss them as clowns who just want to, wave their wieners around, and I don't think they deserve much of our serious time or attention if that's the way they're going to behave. If people want to really engage with ideas about how somebody could have pulled this off, then that's another matter entirely, because it would require accounting for all of these layers of not just the writing of a work of straight fiction, not just the writing of a novel, but the writing of this multi-authored, this work through these multiple authors, and assuming the voices of these multiple authors. If people had any imagination, if people who don't believe that the Book of Mormon can be what it is, what it claims to be, if they had some imagination, I think that's just too much to ask. I think here's my religious magical thinking, if you will. But I think there's a kind of stunting and shriveling effect of the mind that bigotry and malice work on the mind. And I think they make people's minds shrunken and small and just, pitiable in their despicable little sordid meanness. And I think that's why most of these people just lack much imagination, not to mention intellectual honesty, intellectual prowess, or good mannered decency. Well, they may put on a show of good manners sometimes when it is a good way to try to get them in the door. But if they had any imagination, they could spin one hell of a conspiracy theory. I mean, and picture this. There's like this secret... Guys, I probably shouldn't be doing this. I'm giving you guys a great idea here, okay? This is like something that Umberto Eco would love. Imagine that there's like this secret group of Freemasons or Rosicrucians or something like that. And they decide what we need to start a new version of Christianity. But it won't be recognized yet. We need to start a new religious movement that is so focused on Jesus, but it's like unrecognizable from mainstream Christianity because we think Christianity is corrupt. So we're going to try to propose an alternative or get an alternative to go. Or you could come up with, you could play around with what motivations they have to do this. But, they've got these very erudite and clever and imaginative people that decide to concoct this Tlön-like world. Tlön is it's from a story by Jorge Luis Borges. It's this idea that there's these academics that get together and they decide to invent a secondary world. And so it's like this really nerdy, it's anticipating what has become popular in fantasy fiction, the world building, right? You create your world, you have your ideas about the languages, the cultures, and Borges goes at excruciating detail into the language and philosophy of this world, and how the language works that doesn't have nouns, I think. And as I recall, it's done by committee, and they're doing it as an anti-Christian project. And things from Tlön begin to make their way into the real world. The narrator, if anybody, okay, let me try to finish the thought first. The narrator of the story is lamenting how the disruptive effect that this is making on the world is kind of ruining his life. All right, so if there's anybody that I could think of that could actually have the wherewithal or the means or the ability to fake something like the Book of Mormon, it would be Jorge Luis Borges, who was, by his own admission, much too lazy to try anything of that length. But he understood. He had this understanding that's crucial to... It's crucial to me. It's become crucial to my renewal of conviction and deepening of conviction of the truth of the Book of Mormon. This understanding of the importance of the context of something that gets written, of who writes what, when, and for what reason. And that has a lot to do with the meanings that you would get out of and how you understand and analyze understand and analyze words. So he has, and he's a 20th century writer, and he's the heir of a lot of intellectual groundwork that I'm not aware of having much established presence in 1820, in the 1820s. Let's say 1820. Let's say, I don't... So it's hard for me to give much credence to the thought that Joseph Smith in 1820 begins this long, brooding project in his mind of slowly, painstakingly making this up. No, I think it would be far more interesting if you guys would imagine some conspiracy of like Rosicrucians or something that start to develop this concept, of saying, okay, well, the Babylonian conquest, the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem. All right, let's say that some people from the tribe of Joseph leave Jerusalem, but let's make an Easter egg. Let's say that it's gonna, that this is 600 years, but we know from our highly specialized sources in the late 19th century, in the late 18th century, in the Enlightenment, in this era where like maybe godless French intellectuals or I don't know what, but we know that the Jews would have, and the Israelites would have used a lunar calendar at the time, and we also know that the dates, that Jeconiah was deported and Zedekiah was put on the throne in 597 BC. So let's make it so that these people that leave Jerusalem are using a lunar calendar. And so it looks like they're leaving in 600 BC, but actually they can't be leaving in 600 BC because of Zedekiah's reign, and when Babylon really destroys Jerusalem, we know it was around 587 BC. We figured all these dates out in the late 18th century because we're so clever and we're Rosicrucians and we've got this cabal of secretly controlling and pulling all the strings around the world and setting up shadow governments and all this great stuff. So let's just put this in as an Easter egg and make it so that the dates line up to these people using a lunar calendar, but nobody will notice for another 150 years. All right, that's just one thing. Let's get all this stuff. We'll meet together in England or in France or something, and then once we've got it all worked out and everything written out, we write this whole thing out. These characters and their chronologies and their lives and their opinions and their personalities and everything like that. And it mimics these ancient writing styles. And you've got this guy who's compiling it all from these sources. All this that goes into it. And all of it, us that then will go over to New York and we'll get some poor, dumb guy and we'll feed this to him. I don't know how we'll figure it out the details. Dan Vogel maybe could get on in this, or he's had his day in the sun. Some other fresh minds, come up and work on this. Okay, how do they grab Joseph? How do they get him in on their conspiracy? And then when it's done, there's no papers to leave behind because this is all like. They brought the gold from overseas. Everything is like financed and controlled from somewhere wealthy, like France or something like that, right? Because they want to start this new religious movement to disrupt the world and help bring about their new world order. Maybe the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is just a shell, a front for this sinister, shadowy, Rosicrucian, something is Freemasonry. I don't know. I'm off on my dates about these secret societies or whatever. But it's all part of their plan. And the original architects of this, I don't know. They they maybe like did a suicide pact, or they sailed to a tropical island, or they just managed to. Maybe they got beheaded. No, that's a bit too early for them to get their heads chopped off in the guillotine. That doesn't work. Okay, you've got some kinks to iron out. All right, but there's things that you can work with here if you really want to make a. You might as well make it fun. You might as well make it interesting. You might as well put some freaking imagination and some intellectual rigor into your trying to debunk us and trying to debunk this book. Because really what people have thrown at it so far is, Jeffrey Holland said frankly pathetic, and that was a very kind understatement. The quality of what so many people have been throwing at us, trying to be just snotty pigeons stomping at the chessboard, trying to debunk or dismiss the Book of Mormon. It's all just such shit, guys. I mean, I'm ashamed for you. I'm embarrassed for you and the low quality of the intellect and imagination you show. Do better. Come up with something at least that's cool and could be made into like a action movie, like the Dan Brown, Tom Hanks movies or something, or even that something like Foucault's Pendulum. Come up with something like that, and that would at least be fun. Like, don't stop committing the sin of stupidity and bad taste. Like, give it some panache and make it worth our while, because it's just depressing that you come at us with such shit. All right, thank you for your attention to this matter.